Hey everyone, I'm Colette and I'm here today from Witch Ways, and today I'm going to jump in on a hashtag called Show and Spell that was started by Cara of Pagan Crafting, and I was also tagged by Star at the Wild Witch, and there's a lot of other creators doing this tag, so be sure to check that out. I'll put a list of some of the creators that I know who are doing it in the description. And today's video is a chance to just kind of share some of the things that I keep in my cupboards and that I use, my apothecary. I'm a green witch in a lot of ways, but I have a lot of other things as well. So I hope you enjoy it. So I'm going to combine some of the questions because the stories that go with some of the things that I'm sharing answer more than one of the prompts. And these were great questions, but not all of them applied to my collection. So I won't be using all of them. So one of the things that inspired me to jump in on this hashtag was the fact that at this time of year, I always go through my herbal storage, my herbal magical supplies, and clean it up, dust it, throw out the things that are too old, and keep the things that are still good, and then also make notes of what I need to harvest a little bit more of before it gets too cold and the foliage dies back on herbs that I need to gather. And also I'll make a note of things that might be coming into season soon that I need more of, like pine needles and holly and things like that. I started collecting when my mother gave me a wooden cigar box that had belonged to her mother in order to hold the things that I brought back from the woods and the beaches that we really frequently visited. And it was one of my favorite things. I could just sit with that box and take the things out of it and look at them and play with them and put them back in for hours. And now that my mother has passed, not only do I have my own collection still, but I have hers as well, which is really special. Most witches use crystals, but I like stones, especially agates, and I use them in spells for their grounding energy, but I also like them to bring in a little bit of color magic, and we'll use them that way to represent seasons or other colors. I use light ones to represent the summer months and above, and I use darker colored ones to represent winter and below. And it's also really common to find yellow ones that I use for spring or summer, and red or orange ones that I use for the autumn. One of the things I do that's a little unusual is I often soak these agates in water and then use the water to anoint my spell bags, altar cloths, and spell paper. This one is Lady's Mantle, and as you can see, it's kind of a pale gray-green. It should be a real vibrant green. And so I'm gonna let go of that and harvest some new because there is still time. And I use Lady's Mantle in spells as kind of a seal and a cap because they have this slightly cupped shape to them. So I'll put one on the bottom and one on the top of a spell bag or on some spell ingredients I'm putting on an altar to seal it and set it. And I learned that so long ago, I don't even know or remember where I learned it. This is some garden sage from my garden, and a lot of people use that similarly to white sage. I wasn't really taught that it did that. I'm sure that everything in the mint family is actually protective and clearing, just because they have that lovely strong scent. But the way I was taught to use this was for wisdom and for anything to do with the mind, the head, clarity, etc. And this is still looking pretty good. So I'm going to put that back and keep that in that pile. I'm going to toss this. This is some blackberry botanical ink that a friend of mine made. It's all dried up and not good anymore. And I use that for writing Samhain spells. So someone just gave me this, a friend of mine, Kate. And it's just a little bit of fresh calendula from your garden. And one of the things I use it for is to represent healing and summer sun in my spells, warmth, fire. And one of the things I'd like you to notice is how bright orange it is. What you get in the store looks really pale and old. I also have, let's see, what else have I got here? Oh, so I've got a little jar of acorns that I use. I collect those and I use those for abundance, expansion, and growth. And I also have a collection of ones that are in tiny form that are used for all new growth and just starting something out there. The ones that aren't fully mature that you find and you harvest about August, you see them fall to the ground. Here's some lilac flowers. I use those for protection, love, and glamour magic. And I don't know if you can see the nice color, but the color still looks good to me, so I'm going to keep that. This is a piece of lace I made when I was going through a magical transition, and I use it for when I need to shift something and also as a portal or gate. And another thing I do is I have a tiny collection of sticks that I use to stir energy into my spells. So this one is hazel. I also make a lot of cordials, as you probably know if you've watched my videos, and I use those for offerings all the time. And I use them for special requests. I usually just use water when I'm making a regular daily offering, but once a week I kind of do something a little more special, and so I will use some of my cordials, or I will use it when I'm doing some really big magic that I really need a lot of help with. And despite the way it sounds, I actually don't see this as transactional. I see this more as me just keeping things in right relationship and keeping our relationship reciprocal. I usually just put the name of the herb on the label. Occasionally I put the date on there as well. Sometimes I'll put the place on the label, but I usually keep that info in a separate journal. One of the labels that I made a little bit more special by putting runes and the name in Gaelic on it is hazel. And so this is hazel bark. And let me see if I can get this to focus. Might make it backwards, we'll see. So I put the Gaelic name, and then I put the runes, and then down here in the bottom I put the part, and I also put the OM symbol, which is a Celtic rune. Blue vervain is such a strong and effective herb. I use it as a strong banisher and a clearer, especially for things that are very acute, like a really intense nightmare where you wake up with your heart racing, or some kind of shock or injury that has just happened. I don't find it's quite as effective for things that have been lingering for a while, that have kind of stuck their claws into you and taken hold. I do other things for that. That's more long-term and requires more of a process. And if something is really acute and upsetting and shocky, one of the ways that I deal with that is to take a one-time dose of 5 drops of tincture or burn it. I call this herb the I've forgotten I'm in a process moment. And what I mean by that is it's like when you forget that there's light at the end of the tunnel, but not only that, you've forgotten you're even in a tunnel that you're going to get out of, and that you are in fact just in a process. You think that everything is going to last forever. The situation you're in has no end. Blue vervain is really great for that as a one-time sporadic dose. And for storage, I mostly use canning jars. The one thing about them is I would say I prefer the lids that are made by the company Ball rather than the company named Care, K-E-R-R, because the inside lining of the lid is so much better. Like when I use the Care, the second I put them on oils, in an oil jar, they just start deteriorating and melting. I mean, I think Care is just kind of crap, frankly. So I get Ball. So I also use baskets for storage. I get really lovely baskets that friends have made, but I also just get regular baskets, often at the dollar store. And I put my herbs in them, and Here's some linen that I use. I like to put linen, cover things up with linen. And the reason I use linen is because it's made from flax, and which is a plant fiber that has its own magical uses. And I like that ancestral connection because my ancestors have used the fibers of flax to make thread and woven it into cloth for probably thousands of years. And I feel like that long tradition of it being used brings its own special kind of magic. So I like to put that in my baskets to cover them up. I also like to do spells in baskets, and I'm just trying to back up so you can see the whole thing. So this is an amazing basket made by Rosie Covert, and I use it to hold spells that I want to do around the circle of life, infinity, and endless possibilities. But that's just what I see in this basket. I actually don't know what her magical intention was when she created it, but it's beautiful. I also have a bigger basket that I use to hold all of my birch twigs and birch wisps that I collect, and I use those to make small brooms and large brooms. You can see my larger broom whisk is over here, and I use that for clearing energy for anything that needs to be renewed. And here's one of my smaller ones. And I also have an even smaller one that is made of grape branches. And then I use this to sprinkle abundance and celebration blends onto my spell papers. I don't know that I would say this piece is historically significant. It's not like an ancient grimoire, but I do have a very old crystal pickle jar that belonged to one of my many times great-great-grandmothers that she brought with her when she got married at 13, and it was very special to her and has been passed down through the female line ever since. And I wanted to use the really beautiful pickle tongs to hold and light my charcoal. That seemed like that would be so powerful, having belonged to my ancestors, and the aesthetic was good. And I actually just started feeling this sense of upsetness and distress from her. And when I checked in, I realized it was something that was very precious and valuable to her because she brought it from her home when she was just 13 and moved to a whole other state. And so I think I ended up using it twice. I think I might have used it even in YouTube once or twice. And I just had to say, you're really not okay with this. I'm sorry, you're right. This is one of your precious things. I really need to just keep it in my cabinet and honor you and not use it to burn charcoal and perhaps destroy it. This might not be bizarre to those of you watching. I'd love to hear if you think it is, but I think a lot of people would actually find it somewhat disturbing. In my ancestral lineage, ashes were really important. Ashes from seasonal bonfires or special celebrations were kept and were used to bless the house or for protection, sometimes even baked into foods. And so I have ashes from the cremation of some of my ancestors and some of my cat companions. And I will use this, don't bake them into things. I draw the line there. But I will use them to give an offering to the earth when I want to call on the ancestors, or at Samhain when I want to honor them. So here are some bones, and the way that I use them is, as you've seen, I just put them on the altar to represent animals, the strength of the animals, to represent the underworld, to represent the ancestral world, to represent the other world. And so another way that I use them, I don't do this in classes with students, but when I'm at home trying to raise energy, I will just keep a little bit of time going by clacking them together. And I think Tuva mentioned on her video that she uses bones for drumming as well. So if I'm pressed on it, I would have to say rosemary. I just use it all the time. I use it for clearing. I use it for protection. It has some elements of prosperity and celebration to it. And so I place it on my altar to imbue and protect my magic with protection and clearing energy. I use it in my charms as protective and clearing energy. I put it in my travel amulets to keep me safe when I'm traveling. I put it in doorway bundles of protection, and I also use it as a steam for my house, a burning herb, and I'll even make oil of it and then put that oil on my hands and then run energy through my hands and imagine that energy of the rosemary and my vital force blessing my home. I would say to start by collecting what is around you. Those things will have magic in them that will resonate most strongly when you're doing magic in your home and your yard. And then move on to collecting things that you find in special places. These things hold the magic of the spirits of that place, and you can call on the magic of that area and the spirits that reside there if they agree to it. So I'm tagging anyone who is a content creator who's watching who wants to make one of these videos. Just use the hashtag show and spell, and you have to have the word and in there, not the symbol. And then I'm going to tag a few other content creators that have very different practices than mine because I want to see what's in their cupboards. So Aster Perpetua, I would love it if you haven't already made a video like this, if you would. Your practice comes from completely different roots than mine. I'd love to see what you do. Mint Fairy, oh my God, I want my cupboards that I store my stuff in to look like the background in your videos. So I'd love to see what little odds and ends of fairy-like things you have in your cupboard. Hearth Witch, you're great and awesome, and you live in England, and I would love to see what kinds of things you have. And Aradia Arcanum on either of her channels, because I think you have a couple. I would love to see what you have, because again, you have a very different practice than I do. So magical crafting, I would also love to see what Amy does with that. So some of these might already have been mentioned, but that's who I'm tagging. Let me know in the comments if this video was helpful to you and if there are similar things you'd like to see from me or other creators. And I want to thank Cara from Pagan Crafting again for starting this hashtag, and Star at Wild Witch for tagging me in it. And I invite you to check out all the other creators that are doing this and see what they have to say. I'm sure they'll have some wonderful videos. I want to thank you all for watching, and I really appreciate it for those of you who feel inclined to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Check out my Patreon if you feel called. I've got some specials coming up for new subscribers in October I'll talk more about later. And so until next time, stay safe and be well.